In a quiet West African village, where the air was thick with the scent of earth and the whispers of spirits, there stood an old colonial house, long abandoned and avoided by most villagers. Its walls, worn and faded, held the marks of another era, one that villagers remembered with reverence and fear. Surrounded by tall trees and a tangled garden left to nature, it seemed to brood, like it held secrets no one dared to uncover. Madhu and Amara, a couple seeking a new beginning, came across this house while looking for a place to call home. They were young, but resilient, familiar with the ups and downs of life, and eager to settle with their son, Obi. When they first heard about the house, it seemed like a rare opportunity, a large, affordable property, an unusual find so close to the village center. They were assured it would be perfect for them, yet every villager they spoke to hesitated, as if holding back something important. "Madhu, this house has history," warned a neighbor, her face creased with concern. "Not every spirit rests, and not every shadow is just a shadow." But Madhu and Amara, rooted in the modern world, dismissed the warnings as superstition. They had spent their lives in the city, where such tales rarely held sway. In their eyes, the house was simply old and in need of a family to bring it back to life. Their son, Obi, was a quiet, observant boy with large, curious eyes. He had his mother's calm nature and his father's spirit of adventure, though he sensed something off about the house as they moved in. The shadows seemed to shift strangely, the air cooler than expected, carrying an unsettling stillness. But like his parents, Obi dismissed these feelings, trying to ignore the faint chills that ran down his spine. The villagers whispered among themselves as Madhu and Amara moved in. Little did they know, this place held an ancient grudge, one that lay dormant, waiting for anyone foolish enough to call it home. And with each passing day, the shadows grew longer, as if watching, waiting. On their first day in the house, Madhu, Amara, and Obi moved through the house, taking in the high ceilings and wide spaces. The air felt cooler than expected, especially for this time of year. Amara wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders, laughing lightly to mask her unease. "It's beautiful," she said to Madhu, though her voice was almost a whisper. "With a little work, it will feel like home." Madhu nodded, his eyes fixed on the light streaming through the windows, illuminating the faint patterns of peeling paint on the walls. He brushed it off as neglect, eager to make this place a sanctuary for his family. Outside, some villagers lingered near the gate, watching with expressions of pity or fear. One elderly man, wrapped in a faded robe, stared intently at them. His gaze met Amara's for a moment, and he slowly shook his head before shuffling away. She felt a chill, reasoning that the villagers' reactions were nothing more than old beliefs. When night fell, the house took on a different character. They feels like the corners of the rooms, dark and heavy, as if alive. The silence became dense. Madhu and Amara lay in bed, listening to every creak of the old house, each one raising an unspoken question. Was this really just an old house? Or was there something lingering here? Meanwhile, in his small room, Obi lay awake. His bed felt unusually cold, and he shivered despite the blankets piled on top of him. His eyes drifted around the room, noticing odd shapes shifting in the dim light, shapes that seemed to stretch and move with a life of their own. The next morning, the family was slow to rise, weary from a night of restless sleep. Madhu tried to shake off the feeling, telling himself that it was just the newness of the place. "We'll get used to it," he assured Amara over breakfast. She nodded, though her eyes lingered on the windows, where the early light seemed weaker than it should be. Days passed, and the sense of unease grew stronger. Obi began complaining of strange sensations before bed, an odd tingling that spread through his legs and arms, almost like a gentle tugging, as if something unseen was pulling at him. Madhu and Amara listened with growing concern, offering soothing words, but feeling a discomfort they couldn't explain. One evening, as the sun set and shadows took their familiar positions in the corners of the house, Amara sat with Obi by the fire. He leaned against her, quiet and watchful. "Are you happy here, my son?" she asked softly, smoothing his hair. "Yes, Mama," he replied. "But the house feels strange, like it's watching us." Amara: "It's just a new place, Obi. It will feel like home soon." Yet even as she spoke, Amara couldn't shake the feeling that something ancient lay dormant here, something waiting for just the right moment to stir. They continued with their daily lives, but each night grew harder as their dreams grew stranger, filled with whispers and a sense that something had shifted in the shadows, and then came the night when the whispers would turn into screams. Things took a terrifying turn as dusk settled. The house grew darker. Obi felt a sharp chill as he climbed into bed. But tonight, the tingling in his limbs wasn't faint or gentle. It came as a deep ache, spreading slowly but unmistakably through his bones. "Mama!" Obi's voice was a thin cry in the darkness, desperate and filled with pain. Madhu and Amara rushed into his room, their faces tight with worry. They found Obi curled into himself, his small hands clenched, his face twisted in agony. "What is it, my boy? What's happening? What is it, my boy? What's happening?" Madhu knelt beside him, his hand trembling as he reached out to touch Obi. It was burning hot, and yet his skin looked pale, almost translucent under the dim light. Madhu's eyes followed hers, and his heart dropped. Obi's limbs looked longer than before, as if they had stretched in just those few moments. His legs seemed to have grown inches, his fingers unnaturally elongated. It was impossible, unthinkable, and yet it was happening right before their eyes. Obi whimpered, clutching at his mother's hand. "Mama, it hurts. It feels like I'm being pulled, stretched." Amara's face paled, her hand tightening around Obi's. She fought to stay calm, but her mind was spinning, searching for any explanation that could make sense of this horrifying transformation. "It's all right, my son. We're here. We're with you," she whispered, though her own voice shook. Madhu stood up, his face drawn tight with desperation. "I'll fetch the doctor," he said, already halfway to the door. But before he could take another step, Obi's body gave a sudden, violent jerk, and he fell from the bed, his back arching as if an invisible force was pulling him from within. The family's cries blended with the house's creaks, lost in the heavy silence. Madhu clutched Obi, helpless as his son twisted in pain, his bones shifting unnaturally. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the pain stopped. Obi lay limp in his father's arms. His body was back to its normal size, as if the force had finally released him. The house fell silent once more. Madhu and Amara exchanged a look filled with questions. They carried Obi to their room, unwilling to leave him alone. The next morning, Obi woke feeling weak and disoriented. He looked at his parents with wide, questioning eyes, like he did not remember about last night. "Mama, did something happen?" he asked. Amara brushed a hand over his cheek. "Nothing that you need to worry about, Obi. Just a strange dream, that's all." Inside, Amara's heart clenched with fear. This wasn't a dream. She'd seen the impossible changes in her son, felt the terror, and sensed this was only the beginning. Every creak and shadow in the house heavy with intent. Madhu and Amara pretended all was well, yet fear clung to them, as haunting as the house itself. They spent the night together, each clinging to the hope that whatever curse had tried to claim Obi would pass. But deep down, they knew that this was only a temporary reprieve. The house had a hold on them, and it wasn't letting go. As the days passed, Obi's health seemed to decline, his strength fading as the nights grew longer. The pain returned each evening, but soon taking hold of him with a vengeance. It was as if an unseen force was draining his life, stretching and twisting his body night after night, while his parents watched in helpless horror. The family grew desperate, seeking answers from doctors and healers who might be able to explain what was happening. But no one could understand all of this. They began to realize that there was only one path left, one person who might know the truth. It was a path they had avoided, a truth they had refused to acknowledge. But the time had come to face the impossible. They would have to seek the village elder, the one who knew the ancient stories, who held the knowledge of the spirits and their ways. And as the sun set on another night, Madhu and Amara made their way to the elder's hut, clutching each other's hands, carrying the weight of their fear and the last hope of saving their son. Madhu and Amara sat across from the elder, their hearts heavy with fear. Every breath felt laden with the weight of ancient knowledge. "This house you live in, it is no ordinary place," the elder began. Both Madhu and Amara could feel the chill of his words settling into their bones. "It is a place where the spirits of our ancestors linger, bound by a curse laid long ago to protect the land. But it is not just any curse. This curse is one of vengeance." Amara clutched Madhu's hand tightly. "Vengeance? For what?" The elder. "Many years ago, there was a family in that house. A mother, blessed with 5 sons, the pride of her heart. Her family was strong and happy, until her eldest son married a woman she did not approve of. The woman became pregnant, and though the mother wanted another son to continue the family's legacy, the woman gave birth to a baby girl. The father of the baby died on the very day his daughter was born," the elder continued. "The mother blamed her daughter-in-law, calling her a witch, a curse on their family. The baby's death followed soon after, and the daughter-in-law, broken by grief, was shunned by the villagers. They whispered that she had brought death into the house. The mother, driven by her hatred, tried to kill the daughter-in-law with the help of her remaining sons. The woman begged for her life, promised to leave and never return, but they did not listen. She tried to escape and fell to her death. The family called it an accident, a suicide, but her spirit knew the truth. And now she seeks revenge," Amara whispered, her voice trembling. "Yes," the elder said. "Her spirit haunts the house, particularly hating boys, for they remind her of the sons who helped end her life. She has taken many lives over the years, all of them young boys. Your son, he is next. Amara, is there nothing we can do? There is a way, but it is fraught with danger, and the price will be steep. The spirit must be appeased, but she is not easily satisfied," said the elder. "What must we do?" Amara asked. "You must gather the sacred herbs from the forest," the elder said. "But that is only the beginning. You must offer something of immense personal value, something that holds part of your spirit, omitting irreplaceable, and even then, there is no guarantee that she will spare your son. If the spirit does not find your offering sufficient, she will take him." Amara gasped, her eyes wide with fear. "Take him? You mean kill him?" The elder. "Yes. The curse she laid is powerful, and it has already taken hold of Obi. Each night her grip tightens. The next attack will be worse. You must act quickly, for your son's time is running out." As the elder finished speaking, Obi, lying weakly on the floor beside his parents, let out a soft, pained groan. His body trembled, as if the spirit was already reaching for him. His skin was pale, and his breathing was shallow. The sight of him made it painfully clear there wasn't much time left. Amara knelt beside her son, tears streaming down her face. "Please, elder, tell us what to do. We will give anything. Just tell us how to save him. The spirit will demand more than just herbs and offerings. She will test you, make you prove your love for your son, and the price will be greater than anything you can imagine." Madhu. We'll do whatever it takes. We will not lose our son. The elders. Then go. Gather the herbs I've told you about. Prepare yourselves for the ritual. But be warned, this spirit feeds on fear and suffering. She will make it as hard for you as possible. You must stay strong, for if you break, she will take more than just Obi, with the elders' words echoing in their ears. Madhu and Amara set off, knowing that they were running out of time. As they left the hut, they could feel the weight of the curse. Pressing down on them, the ominous promise of death hanging over their son like a shadow, and as night fell, the spirit's grip on Obi tightened. His body convulsed violently, his skin stretching and tearing under the strain of the supernatural growth. He was slipping away, falling deeper into the spirit's grasp. Madhu and Amara knew they were on the brink of losing him forever. The walk back to the house felt heavier with each step. The elders' words weighed on Madhu and Amara, a dark cloud of fear. Every breath felt more labored, every beat of their hearts filled with the dread of losing Obi. By the time they reached the house, night had fully descended, bringing with it an unnatural stillness. Inside, the air was thick with tension, and every shadow seemed to pulse with dark intent. Obi lay motionless on the floor, his skin pale and clammy, his chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. Amara rushed to his side, her hands trembling as she checked his pulse. His heart was beating, but it was faint, as if it could stop at any moment. "Madhu," she whispered, her voice filled with terror. "He's getting worse." The spirit's grip was tightening, dragging their son closer to death. "We don't have time," Madhu said, panic rising in his chest. "We need to start the ritual now." But even as he spoke, Obi's body convulsed violently, his limbs jerking uncontrollably. His small frame arched painfully, and a pained scream tore from his throat, echoing through the house with a bone-chilling resonance. His bones cracked and shifted beneath his skin, growing at an unnatural rate, stretching him beyond what his frail body could endure. Amara sobbed, cradling her son as his body twisted in her arms. "Please, Obi, stay with us, please." His breathing became erratic, a sharp, rasping sound that sent chills through both parents. Madhu watched in helpless, knowing that if they didn't act soon, they would lose him forever. "We need to gather the herbs," Madhu said. "We have to move quickly." Amara nodded, her tears falling and her heart breaking with every step she took away from him, and deliver her son to the elders. Together, they raced into the night, venturing into the forest to gather the sacred herbs the elder had described. As they moved through the darkened woods, every rustle of leaves and creak of branches felt like the spirit's presence looming over them. Their fear of the unknown gnawed at them, but their determination to save Obi pushed them forward. They gathered the herbs with shaking hands, their minds filled with the image of their son suffering. Time was running out, and they knew they were barely holding on to the threads of his life. When they returned to the house, Obi's condition had worsened. His breathing was barely audible, and his body had become still. His skin, now stretched thin over his unnaturally long limbs, had taken on an eerie pallor. Amara knelt beside him, her hand resting over his chest, waiting for the faint beat of his heart. It was barely there. "No, no, no, please," Amara begged, her voice barely above a whisper. "Please don't leave us, Obi, please." Madhu prepared the herbs. He could feel the weight of Spirit's presence, the oppressive energy pushing down on him. They had to act now. With trembling hands, Madhu and Amara quickly arranged the herbs around Obi's fragile body. The dim candlelight flickered wildly, casting long, jagged shadows on the walls, as if the house itself was alive, watching them. The air grew colder, almost suffocating, and they knew the spirit was near, waiting for them to begin the ritual. Amara, her face wet with tears. His heartbeat was faint, barely detectable. His chest barely rose, each breath more strained than the last. She could feel him slipping away. Desperation surged through her, and she looked to Madhu with wide, pleading eyes. "We're losing him, Madhu. He's not going to make it." Madhu swallowed hard, fighting back the panic that threatened to overtake him. The elder had warned them. This spirit wouldn't be easily appeased. But the price they might have to pay was higher than they had imagined. The herbs were ready, the offerings prepared. But the elder's final warning echoed in his mind. The spirit will demand more than just herbs. It will test you, make you prove your love for your son, and the price will be greater than you think. Madhu knelt by Obi's side, placing his hand over Amara's. "We won't let him go, not yet." They began the chant the elder had taught them, their voices quivering at first but gradually gaining strength. The strange, ancient words filled the room, wrapping around them like a protective barrier. The air seemed to pulse with energy, the oppressive weight of the spirit growing heavier. As the chant intensified, the shadows in the room thickened, twisting and writhing as if alive. The spirit's presence became undeniable, and suddenly the temperature dropped even further. The candles flickered, nearly extinguishing, and Amara gasped as a cold gust of wind swept through the room. Then the spirit appeared. A figure began to materialize in the corner of the room, dark and ghostly. It was the woman, the wronged daughter-in-law, her eyes filled with rage and sorrow. "You dare call upon me?" the spirit's voice echoed, chilling and ancient. "You think you can save this boy from what is owed to me?" Amara's voice broke as she spoke, her heart pounding in her chest. "Please, he is just a child. He has done nothing to you. Spare him, I beg of you." The spirit: "I have waited for justice. This boy, he is a reminder of those who wronged me. I will not let him live." Madhu stepped forward, his hands shaking but his voice steady. "We offer our lives instead. Take us, but let our son live." She replied, "It is not enough. You must prove your love by giving up everything. Your home, your land, your legacy. You will leave this village and never return. Only then will I consider sparing him." Obi let out a weak, pained groan, and Madhu's heart shattered. He knew they had no choice. "We'll do it. We'll leave. We'll give it all up. Just please, let him live." The spirit's form flickered, her eyes burning with a cold fire. "Then be gone. But remember, I will be watching." With those words, the spirit began to dissolve into the shadows, the temperature rising back to normal. The candles steadied, and a deep silence fell over the room. Obi's body stopped convulsing, his breathing slowing to a steadier rhythm. But the air was thick with the knowledge that their sacrifice had been made. They had saved Obi, but at a terrible cost. The room was deathly silent as the spirit faded into the shadows. Obi lay motionless between them, his small body still and frail. For a moment, they feared they had lost him after all, that their sacrifice had come too late. But then, a shallow breath escaped Obi's lips. His chest rose, slowly but surely, and his eyes fluttered open, weak but alive. "He's alive," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Thank the spirits, he's alive." But the room still held attention. They knew the spirit's parting words were not just a warning, they were a promise. Madhu said quietly, "We can't stay here anymore. We've given up our land, our home. We have to leave, Amara. We have to go now." As they gathered the few belongings they could manage, everything that belongs to them, it was all gone. They had no future here. The spirit had taken everything from them, except the one thing that mattered most, Obi's life. They stepped out into the cold night. The village was silent, as if the people inside knew what had transpired and chose not to witness it. There were no farewells, no words of comfort. The village was no longer their home. They disappeared into the mist, the weight of their sacrifice heavy on their hearts. They had escaped with their lives, but their future was uncertain, haunted by the knowledge that the spirit's revenge was never truly over. And in the quiet stillness of the night, the house stood, waiting patiently for its next inhabitants. If you like the story, please share, like, and subscribe for more interesting stories.